end.
Hi everyone, so Blizzard has just announced the Season 23 release date. It's gonna be the 2nd of April and the final patch notes. So 2nd of April is a bit surprising because it's only a 5-day break to the previous season, and for the last 2 years or so they have always been doing 12 days, so pretty much everyone expected the 9th of April. It's probably a good thing that it releases earlier, but it's not really a good thing that it comes at such short notice, I believe. There's probably a lot of people that were expecting the 12th and maybe have taken holidays already and these kind of things, and suddenly there's this inconsistency again, but oh well. So this is what we have. Here's the blog post, and they also, oh boy, destroyed everything that this patch was bringing us. So I think this looks really bad. So my expectation for this patch was a nerf to Firebirds that is somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 tiers, because right now it was way overperforming, especially with this mirror image Deathwish build that we had at the end. It was extremely good, very easy to do solo 150 with, and pretty much way above everything else in the game. So any kind of nerf in that range would have been good, and we would have had a new form meta, we would have had a new XP meta that would be the rats, and apparently we can't have that. And for the Rathma, I would say we needed some big buffs, especially considering that they would most likely remove Land of the Dead Invigoration, which they did, but there was no compensation for any of that. In fact, there was actually a nerf to Bone Spirit on top of the Land of the Dead Invigoration removal, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So Bone Spirit is essentially, it's actually worse than on the live servers now. So they took a build that no one played in the game and then made it even worse because they also nerfed the Defiler quizzes that previously were stacking up to 30 seconds and now they can do only 5. And otherwise the build is plus minus same damage, I guess. So there you go, damage is cut to like 20% of what it can do on live. That was great. And also Army of the Dead needed a huge buff, and it got a little bit. So they did actually do a good change here on the 2-piece, 0.5 seconds instead of 0.25 on the cooldown reset. I guess this is pretty much what's needed to make it feel smooth enough to be very nice for T16, for speed farming, just to actually be able to cast the skill once in a while, not just once every convention cycle. So I can actually do it twice now for sure, maybe even 3 times in certain situations. So that will definitely help out. And then they slightly, I wouldn't even call this a buff, so they added basically the golem to the 6-piece bonus. So in case you would somehow fit in the golem, which there's basically no way of doing in any situation, you would get a slight benefit of like 6% DPS here. Wow. And also Bonds of Selena got changed completely. So they removed Bone Spirit entirely from this, which I don't get at all. And they added Army of the Dead as the only skill buffed by this. So first of all, they made Bonds of Selena for both skills, then they removed Army, and now they changed it to Army and removed Bone Spirit. Not only that, but even with this 400% damage buff, just from this Land of the Dead Invigoration nerf, Bone Spirit was already looking like not really such a great build to begin with. So we had this permanent invincibility, and now we don't even have that. So the build drops by probably at least 5 tiers because of this, because now you have to play Frozen Lands. There is no cooldown resets for anything, so you have to play Land of the Dead. For example, I suggested to maybe put cooldown reset for Bone Spirit on the 2-piece, and then maybe buff the braces a little bit. Yeah, anyway, so this is out now, and we have this instead. And yeah, while I really like this effect of the double damage for a single target, that is pretty cool. So you're gonna obliterate bosses in solo pushing with this. The overall power level of both these builds is quite weak now. So they are somewhere like C tier or something, or D tier, I don't know exactly. So on our tier list that would correspond to probably something like GR 135 or so. It's hard to say exactly, but this is kind of like the top at potential for both of these builds. So obviously this is way behind the top builds. This is way behind Bone Spear on the Necromancer. This is way behind Valor, Twister Wizard, all these kind of things. And there's basically no purpose for any of these. At least before, you could use Bone Spirit as kind of like a solo speed farming build that was fairly decent. Now you don't even have that, because this nerf also means like a 10 tier nerf or so. So I'm not really sure what's the purpose of all of this. Army of the Dead is probably slightly better than Bone Spirit now, but not by much, because it's just a very, very weak setup. Has some other issues like the Fate's Vow being additive damage instead of multiplicative, so we can't even reasonably use it in groups at all, even if you try it. So there's basically no way for this. Now for the Firebirds. So my suggestion to Blizzard here was to revert the buff from the 2-piece Firebirds from 7,500 to 3,000, and hey, they did exactly that. Amazing. So this was 3,000%, they buffed it to 7,500, and they buffed some other things, and then they made it 3,000 again. So great, because this would be roughly a 6-tier nerf here. But they also decided to cut the 4-piece bonus in half and cut the 6-piece bonus in half. So in total, we're looking at a damage cut of roughly 90% or so. And this means something like a 15-tier nerf. So this is way more than I had anticipated. This makes Firebirds not too terrible, but it's also nothing really great. So top end potential again, somewhere at maybe 140 on the very high end. It's not a super bad set now, but it's also just not really good enough anymore. There is a slight, I guess, buff to teleport. So who knows what that means. But since teleport's animation is extremely terrible, I believe this is actually an improvement, and this would probably mostly benefit builds something like Veer Archon that can teleport really fast. Firebirds maybe too, but I don't think it would really kind of make up for all these nerfs in any way. So maybe for T16 farming or for solo speed farming, you would maybe be a bit quicker and it would feel more smooth. So I'm looking forward to that. But in terms of meta, 4-man XP farming with the bird runs that we are hoping to get, which is a very fun meta. I've shown this in a video or in multiple videos even. There was potential for a trash killer, there was potential for a Rift Guarding killer. Rift Guarding killer might still be kind of an option, but it's probably outclassed by the Crusader, so we'll see about that. But the build you're gonna play with Firebirds and solo pushing, at least the best build, is gonna be the Mirror Image Death Wish combo. And while Mirror Image is so underused and kind of like a new thing now suddenly, I really dislike that it's a Death Wish build yet again. So I was expecting them to fix that and then maybe do some small adjustments and keep Firebirds somewhere at the top, give a heavy buff to both Bone Spirit and Army of the Dead. Nothing of that happened. In fact, one of those builds actually got nerfed. No compensation for Rathma, low toughness, no compensation for anything here on the Firebirds. Yeah, so I don't really know what this is supposed to be, but this is what we get now. There is, however, a nice change, that is the God DH. So they buffed the 9th series Satchel to 4 pierces instead of 3, and that is actually a very good change, I believe. So not only does that slightly increase the pushing potential to be above rapid fire again, because for now it looked like Natalia rapid fire would be the best Demon Hunter build, and we really want to avoid that, I believe. So that is great, and God DH definitely has like 140 plus pushing potential again. Not the same as on live service, but again, there's no missile dampening fishing anymore. It's much more consistent. It's just gonna feel much better for most people, I can tell. And it's gonna be the undisputed king of solo farming. So God DH is the thing now for everything solo related, and I believe a lot of people will have a lot of fun with God DH. And it does bring a little bit of hope for a God DH 4-man meta that is not gonna beat Rats, but that is gonna be reasonably close to Rat runs. So Rats will do something like 105s to up to 120 GRs in like 1.5 minutes roughly. And God DH in the 4-man meta that we have seen from season 21 when the set came out is probably gonna run similar tiers at a slightly slower pace, like half a minute slower or 40 seconds slower or something like that. So it will be slightly less, but it's hard to say how much this 4-piece changes will actually impact that meta. It will probably not do that much, maybe like another +1 tier or so. In solo pushing, I would say this is something like +2 tiers compared to what we had with the previous changes here. So yeah, this is gonna be probably the only alternative to Rat runs or to Bat runs, the one with the Bone Spear instead of Rat as the second Necro, and that is gonna be about it. Here is no change to Spirit Barrage, so the nerf stays as it is. I think this is okay. It could have been slightly unnerved in my opinion. I talked about this in my other video, but it's probably fine. In terms of 4-man pushing meta, we'll have to see. Right now it looks like there is no real winner for trash killing, at least. So there is Heaven's Fury, there is Bone Spear, there is Spirit Barrage, yes, even with the nerf. And there's even potentially stuff like Grim Scythe and other things that are kind of out of the meta for a while. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what we'll end up playing. Right now it's probably going to be the Heaven's Fury, but it might not be really kind of like the end game meta that everyone likes or wants to play, because it's probably going to be a triple support meta, and it's also not really a puck friendly meta, so you really need coordinated groups to even pull this off. So we might actually end up with something like Bone Spear plus X Rift Guardian Killer again, just at the lower tier. So this is something that most people are familiar with. Most people are also familiar with the Witch Doctor from season 20. So there is definitely a bit of variety possible here. In terms of Rift Guardian Killer, we actually have Heaven's Fury and the Invoker Crusader now, full Invoker. So that is most likely gonna win. And there is also still some possibility for a Firebirds Rift Guardian Killer, because for single target that was actually extremely strong, and you might be able to improve that a bit with some tweaks. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, it's probably one of those two Crusader builds. Here are some bug fixes. So they changed the Legacy Age Sigil. Who knows what that means, but for non-season, it probably means that Age Sigil is dead for Firebirds. And I guess they over-nerfed Firebirds maybe because of non-season, and then they also nerfed their Legacy Age Sigil, because on the PTR people used Legacy Age Sigils that buffed all of their damage by 150% instead of just the Twister damage, and they were pushing a bit higher. But it's non-season, who really cares? So they could have just left that, I believe, but okay. And then there is also some other bug fixes like the Follows G Death, that is nice. There is a Templar bug fix, I didn't even know about this. And okay, something like this. They also slightly nerfed the Scoundrel, so I skipped over this at the start. So Scoundrel was going to be kind of the undisputed best follower for a lot of pushing builds. Now there's a bit more competition, I'd say. It's not a completely, kill off Scoundrel change. So 4 seconds is a very short duration, I believe, for this Knight's Wail, which was kind of like the super crazy #1 ability that the followers had. And it was 10 seconds before. I believe they could have just left it as it is, maybe slightly reduced it, or maybe just buff the other followers instead, because, well, we need buffs to solo play and not nerfs. You're most likely still gonna take Scoundrel for at least dual wielding builds, because you get more value out of the crit buffs. And for other builds, especially those that require a lot of cooldown, you're most likely gonna run the Enchantress, which also has a good mix of offense and defense. So that's about it for this patch. Personally, I was extremely excited to do these bird runs, play Wizard again. I guess a lot of people were hyped for that. It's still gonna be decent. It's not gonna be super OP. Firebirds is gonna be outclassed by at least Twister Wizard and maybe even Hydra, and it's gonna be okay. Theoretically, it's a quite balanced build now. So if we count in all the other builds in the game, we have some overperforming ones like Bone Spear, like Heaven's Fury, and these kind of things. And if those builds were nerfed as well, then Firebirds would be actually in the perfect spot, I'd say. But since those builds are not nerfed, we're not gonna have the new shiny stuff being the meta. And I believe that at least when they do a rework like this, it should be maybe at the top or close to the top, so that people actually have a reasonable option to choose that meta. Same with the Rathma. Rathma is just not really serving any purpose now. At least before, you had Bone Spirit to maybe be a Rift Guardian Killer option that you could use for rank 1 pushing and 4-man, or just in general if you really like that build. Would it be maybe on average slightly worse than other options for Rift Guardian Killers like Heaven's Fury? And you could do still, these funny clips with like a power pylon where you just blast the boss down in no time, and that would kind of reward playing Bone Spirit over playing Heaven's Fury, for example. And it was a fairly okay solo farming build that I made work on a PTR, so I was actually also quite excited to try to optimize that more in the future. But now there's basically no way to do that. And then Army of the Dead, it got so heavily nerfed on the first PTR patch. There was no permanent invincibility anymore. This means no squirts. This means just less damage in general. You have to stack more defense. The build is squishy to start with already, and then they just very slightly buffed it again. It's just not enough. It's kind of a sad story with Rathma, but this is what it is. Personally, I'm still quite excited for the season because of the set leaderboards especially, so I don't know exactly what I'm going to start with now. We're going to discuss internally, and it's still going to depend on my group. Before it was most likely going to be Wizard. Maybe I'll do Necro now, maybe I'll go DH now, we'll see. And I'm planning to push a lot of different sets. Recently, I had a lot of fun playing a lot of off-meta builds. This season already, I've been pushing some stuff like Uliana Monk and Leapquake. That was great. I might do similar things in the next patch as well. I'm very excited for the Shimizu Monk, so that's going to be great. I'm still going to try out both of the new builds, or all three of the new builds, so Army, Bone Spirit and Firebirds, and see how far we can actually push them. And for the rest, we'll see. In terms of guides, I have, well, a very busy schedule now, because I expected the 9th of April, now we have the 2nd. I have many videos to make, so stay tuned for that. We also have all the Maxwell guides being updated right now, so we're gonna have the new guides coming out for Rathma, for both Army of the Dead and Bone Spirit very soon. I'm actually writing those. And there's also going to be 2 Firebird guides that will come out. And also all our other builds will be updated to the Season 23 version with the new follower stuff, with all the buffs and nerfs or whatever that means for those builds. So that will also happen probably during this week. At least here on Maxwell, you're going to be in for a treat. So I hope that you'll like what we're doing here at least. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. We have all the build guides here, very detailed, and lots of other stuff that you can find here for any kind of game-related questions, mechanics, and whatever else you might want to find out. So this is what I have to share for now. It is kind of a sad story, but it is what it is. I'm gonna blast the season anyway. I know I always have fun, and I hope you will too. So hope you guys liked my video here. See you guys next time.